Radiation levels at one of Fukushima's nuclear power stations is at its highest level since the tsunami-triggered meltdown nearly 6 years ago. Tokyo Electric Power, or TEPCO, is reporting that atmospheric readings inside Daiichi's reactor number 2 are as high as 530 sieverts an hour. To put that in perspective for you, a human that is exposed to a single dose of 10 sieverts would die in a couple of weeks. The levels being recorded here are 53 times that. TEPCO says it's possible melted fuel has leaked through the pressure vessel. The discovery is going to seriously challenge the efforts to safely dismantle this plant. Let's bring in Kevin Camps, radioactive waste watchdog from Beyond Nuclear. Kevin, 530 sieverts, it seems unfathomable. Can you explain what's likely going on here?
Well, you know, this catastrophe that's ongoing is nearly 6 years old at this point, and the fuel, the melted cores, have been missing in action. Tokyo Electric doesn't know where they are. The Japanese government doesn't know where they are. Nobody knows where they are. So what could have happened is these probes, these cameras, these robots, these radiation monitors that are being sent in by Tokyo Electric to try to figure out what's going on may have encountered the closest they've come yet to these melted cores. Mm-hmm. They may even have come upon melted fuel that's not underwater, and water serves as a radiation shielding. So if this is an open air area and there's no water, that could explain. But what you've got are melted reactor cores, and of course human beings can't be in operating atomic reactors. They also can't be in this area where there's a meltdown. Mm-hmm. And there's also imagery. It looks like a melt through of a metal grate, and so it all stands to reason that the cores melted through the reactor pressure vessels and down into the containment structures, right through that metal grating. And it's not unexpected, but we still don't know where the cores are. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's claims that, oh, it's all contained, don't worry about it. There's actually, I mean, it's indisputable that there's a daily flow of radioactively contaminated groundwater into the ocean. The figure is something like 80,000 gallons per day of relatively low-level radioactive wastewater. And then you've got those storage tanks. We're talking 800,000 tons of highly radioactive water being stored in tanks, because every day they pour 100 tons of water on each of these 3 melted down cores. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they lose those tanks. They leak, they overflow, so it's an ongoing catastrophe.
So you're saying that the contamination in this case could leak out, that that's a possibility?
There is some leakage on a daily basis, mm-hmm. and then they try to capture as much as they can and contain it in these storage tanks, which they sometimes lose, whether during a typhoon or through human air. They've had overflows. So, you know, there are many shoes that could still drop at Fukushima Daiichi. One of the ones is the high-level radioactive waste storage pools that aren't even inside radiological containment. They don't have all of that spent nuclear fuel transferred to a safer location in a couple of the units still. So if something were to go wrong with that, those would be open-air releases of very high-level radioactivity. We're talking, you know, the prime minister at the time the catastrophe began, Khan, had a contingency plan to evacuate all of northeast Japan, up to 50 million people, and it was predominantly because of those storage pools. And we're still in that predicament if one of those pools were to go up in flames, as Tokyo plans to host the 2020 Olympics and bring in many millions of extra people into this already densely populated area. It's not a good idea.
So all eyes on them. I want to get back to this specific leak, though. How does this complicate the cleanup efforts there? And is it possible even to get something in there right now to examine what's going on? I heard that they had a robot that they wanted to put in there, a remote-controlled robot, but it only has a capacity to withhold 1,000 sieverts, so it would end up dying before it's in there 2 hours for good.
Right. State-of-the-art robotic technology, and Japan is a world leader in robotics, can only last so long because the electronics get fried by the gamma radiation and probably even neutron radiation that's in there. You know, that's the situation deep in there. They're already saying it'll take 40 years to so-called decommission this, but that may be optimistic.
And not just that, but in December, the government said it was actually going to take twice as much money, nearly twice as much as they originally thought, to decommission that. Does this make matters even worse, this leak, or is this just kind of the situation that we expect at this point?
Well, it just shows how dire the situation is. And you know, the figures of $150 billion to decommission, I've seen figures from a think tank in Japan, cited by Greenpeace Japan, up to $600 billion. If you do full cost accounting, where is this high-level radioactive waste going to go? It's going to need a deep geologic repository. You have to build that and operate it. That costs $100 billion or more. So when you do full cost accounting, this catastrophe could cost hundreds of billions of dollars to recover from. We're just in the beginning.
And not to mention, I mean, if they're talking 40 years, that's a long time to try to figure it out, but leakage happening, possible contamination in our oceans, things that we all need to be paying attention to.
It's an unprecedented catastrophe for the world's oceans.
And almost 6 years later, we're still dealing with serious effects of that. Kevin Camps with Beyond Nuclear, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Many people want to connect the coming Olympics with the recovery from the disaster of 2011. How would you like to link these two together?
I believe that recovery from the Great East Japan earthquake is an important perspective. There are still people abroad who vividly remember footage of the tsunami and have doubts about holding the Olympics in a country that has been so affected by disaster. So it's extremely important to show the world how Japan has rebuilt. People have asked us if special consideration can be given to the disaster-stricken areas during the Olympic torch relay. We've had requests to invite athletes from abroad to the 3 worst-hit prefectures and use these areas for training camps or for practice or to adjust to Japan's climate and time difference. If the people in the disaster-hit areas are encouraged by seeing athletes, and if this can be another step towards recovery, it would be an important effect for the Olympics.
The Games will attract many foreign visitors. Muto wants them to enjoy the Games and return home with some of Japan's charm in their hearts.
Japanese culture contains both traditional and contemporary aspects, such as anime created by the young. Hospitality is also another part of this culture. If these are communicated to the world, it could lead to a re-evaluation of Japan. That will attract repeat foreign visitors who want to experience Japanese culture again. If signs and digital directions for foreign visitors were installed in every part of Japan, so they wouldn't get lost, more people will be able to visit. They would go back home and tell their families and friends what a wonderful place Japan is. They'd talk about it for the rest of their lives. These are the kind of people who will serve as the best goodwill ambassadors. I don't want the 2020 Olympics to end as just a festival. What if the Games shaped minds and left an impression on the young? People will look back on 2020 and remember what a wonderful year it was. That would be amazing.
Now, radiation near Tokyo spiked 100 million times normal after Fukushima. Intensive contamination hit the Tokyo area, extremely high levels detected. Info about radioactive contamination hidden from public. Well, that was only 7 years ago. The first half-life just of cesium-137 is 30 years. So we're at the infancy that this stuff is still there. And when you get into some of these other isotopes, like plutonium and strontium and uranium, where you're having half-lives of 2 billion years or something ridiculous, this stuff is going to be here forever. We're only into year 7. So Tokyo is still contaminated. It's a nuclear waste site. Tokyo contaminated and not fit for habitation. 23 districts of Tokyo are contaminated, with the eastern area the worst affected. It's up to 4,000 becquerels a kilogram. While practicing in Tokyo, this guy discovered that there's changes in the white blood cells of children under 10. Now, it's not only the oceans being affected, the air being affected, humans are being affected, especially the young. Now here's the decay of the cesium. In 30 years, half of it is going to be decayed into barium. It's going to take 300 years to completely go away. That's a long ways away, and Fukushima is still a baby. This is outskirts of Tokyo, it states. On the ground, it's going up to 5 microsieverts. And every time it rains, it's being redistributed for the next million years. Fukushima radiation found in Hawaii fish, almost half contain fallout from Japan nuclear disaster. What they're telling you is, when they do these studies, they're all saying that it's safe for you to still ingest. Now, 13 commonly consumed types of fish caught in the North Pacific, locally available in Hawaii, were analyzed. All fish samples had detectable cesium-137 above a 95% confidence. 3 out of the 13 samples had cesium-134, an isotope indicative of Fukushima releases detected above 95% confidence. Now, the highest concentration was in this ahi tuna, and it doesn't matter what number it is, because one isotope is bad. That's what Fukushima changed. It changed the world. Here's where it's bleeding, and it's sending it straight to the United States. But it doesn't stop there. It's going to get kicked back up again and be regurgitated, and it's going to be just, for the next 100,000 years, just radiation building up. Fukushima will leak radiation into the sea forever.
And let's be blunt about this. Would you buy food that says made in Chernobyl? And the Japanese people are also saying, what, should I buy food that says made in Fukushima? Just because the government tries to lowball all the numbers, downplay the severity of the accident, and that's making it much worse.
Look at this, right up against the ocean, when the water is going to come in and just knock all that stuff around. People driving and working right next to it. You know how much radiation is coming out of these bags? You wouldn't be able to believe it unless you've seen it. And now that you've seen it, I guess you gotta believe it. Unbelievable. Incredible. Look at this. They still got to fill this little area in here. They had a nuclear explosion. And look at, put a hole in it. Put a hole in the grate. It's what they call a China syndrome. It's out of control. They're never going to be able to get a hold of this thing. You can't. Radioactive contamination. Uninhabitable. Japan should have been evacuated, at least 40 million people due to Fukushima mega nuclear disaster, but denied any meltdowns have happened for several months, despite knowing within hours 20 millisieverts a year now okay to live in. They called for the evacuation of Tokyo. Japanese Prime Minister promised that the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant was under control to get the bid for Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. He says a complete lie. You got to go to some sites that, if you want to know what's really going on, this Energy News is where you want to head to. Fukushima Everything, this is where you want the headlines. If you want to know what's going on and up to date. And if you want to know video-wise, Beautiful Girl by Dana, I encourage. Every day there's a new update. He knows what he's talking about. They cover more than I could even cover. And this guy, Dana Durnford, he actually did 5,000 miles on the British Columbia coast and documented that right now, post-Fukushima, there's barely 100 species total on the west coast, where it used to be 7,000 species in a tidal pool. This is an extinction level event that he's proving. And unfortunately, the people in Japan, if they try to speak about it, they can get thrown in jail, because Japan whistleblowers face a crackdown under a proposed law. It says journalists, whistleblowers in Japan could find themselves facing long spells of prison for divulging and reporting state secrets, including sensitive information about the Fukushima nuclear disaster.
What about the evacuation zone? Is it big enough?
It's pathetic. They're literally making it up as they go along. We're in totally uncharted territories. You get any nuclear engineering book, look at the last chapter, and this scenario is not contained in the last chapter of any nuclear engineering textbook on the planet Earth. So they're making it up as they go along, and we are the guinea pigs for this science experiment that's taking place. But remember, in the area, the sea, we're talking about levels that are millions of times beyond legal levels found right there. And radiation has already appeared in the drinking water in Tokyo. And so people are wondering, you know, especially for young children, for pregnant women, should they leave? People are voting with their feet now. A lot of people are voluntarily evacuating from Tokyo because they simply don't believe the statements of the utility, which have consistently lowballed all the estimates of radiation damage.
Local authorities and fishermen say they're worried about the effects on the environment if something goes wrong.
I will give you my conclusion first. It poses no problems whatsoever. I ask that you read through the headlines and instead appraise the true situation.
Some may have concerns about Fukushima. Let me assure you, the situation is under control.